and sisters, let us give a warm welcome to Venerable YouLu. Please join us back together and bow to our Venerable.
师父吉祥，
Venerable
阿弥陀佛。
So the topic for tonight's talk is Sumati Sutra, 10 Paths to Happiness. Let us now give our ears to Venerable, please.
Okay, good evening everyone. Yeah, so today I'll be talking about the Sumati Sutra, which is this book over here. Okay, let me give you a brief introduction to the book. So this book was first published in Chinese in 2013, and this book was actually a compilation of teachings that was given to the Female Buddhist College by Dharma Master. Okay, and Dharma Master gave this teaching for two reasons. Is that he wanted to eradicate the ideas of females being inferior. I think in Asian societies in general, females are reckoned to have a more inferior status. Okay, and so Dharma Master has always been addressing this issue of gender inequality. And so I think one of the reasons why he chose this particular sutra is that he wanted to show that females have equal capability in all kinds of areas, even in seeking enlightenment, okay, even in seeking the highest goal of enlightenment. And the second reason why he gave this sutra is also to elevate the social status of females through this scripture. Okay. Okay, and then in the introduction of this book, Dharma Master also mentioned how females have been supporting Buddhism in many different areas. So he gave 4 different examples. One is that women act as Dharma protectors by being sponsors of Buddhist activities. So you can see that very clearly at the temples, even at Foganshan, Singapore. Right, you see many females devotees here, and you see that they are playing also very active roles in supporting the parish temple. And women provided services in many ways. So in the kitchen, or in giving courses, or in helping out with different kinds of activities, female have been very supportive. Female play an active role in propagating Buddhism. So that is also very apparent. You see all the venerables here are all females, right? The chief abbess is also female. And even the lay, the lay monastic that we have is also female. And women address welfare in society. So we also have the children's home, and we also have the elders' home, and females are playing a very active role in doing that. Okay, so in general, females have been contributing a lot in the area of Buddhist activities, not only in Taiwan, but also worldwide, in many of the different branches, in different parts of the world. And so I think through this scripture, Dharma Master is also trying to acknowledge the contribution that women have been giving throughout the years. Okay, so about this sutra, it's part of a larger sutra called the Great Treasures Collection Sutra, or in Chinese we say 大宝积经. And the Great Treasures Collection Sutra describes the Bodhisattva path. So it is a Mahayana Sutra, and it shows the Buddha predicting the future enlightenment of his disciples. Okay, so in this particular sutra, the Buddha gave a lot of prophecy to to many of his disciples. Okay, and the Great Treasures Collection Sutra is one of the 5 notable Mahayana sutras. So, apart from this particular sutra, we also have the Great Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, the Great Collection Sutra, the Flower Adornment Sutra or the Avatamsaka Sutra, and also the Great Nirvana Sutra or Mahaparinirvana Sutra. Okay, so these are the 5 most important sutras in the Mahayana tradition. Okay. Right, and then in this particular sutra, it consists of 120 scrolls. So you might be wondering what it means by a scroll. So, for example, now if we publish a book, so we will have something, we call it a volume. Right? We have volume 1, volume 2, etc. But in the past, there was no printing. In ancient China, when there was no printing, people disseminated Buddhist texts through sutra calligraphy, through transcribing. So they would have a long sheet of paper, and then they would transcribe the text on these sheets of paper, and then they would roll it up to it. So one scroll, when they roll it up, it's called a scroll. Okay, so this particular sutra is written on 120 scrolls. Okay, so which is a lot. But of course, in modern time, now that we have printing, then it might not be 120 volumes. It might be, maybe 10 volumes or so. Okay. And then it describes 49 different assemblies. So the Sumati Sutra is the 30th assembly. So each assembly in this particular sutra is one sutra on its own. Okay, so this Great Treasures Collection Sutra actually have 49 different sutras inside this collection. And the Sumati Sutra is the 30th sutra. Okay. And it was translated by Bodhiruchi. Bodhiruchi is one of the 4 most important translators in Chinese Buddhist history. And he is an Indian monastic. And he acted as the overall editor of the sutra. Okay. And before Bodhiruchi actually did the compilation and the editing of this sutra, Master Xuanzang, I believe most of you would know Master Xuanzang, maybe from Journey to the West. He is also an eminent monk from the Tang Dynasty, and also one of the 4 great translators. So he went to India, and then he actually brought back a Sanskrit copy of this sutra. But unfortunately, after translating 600 scrolls of the Great Perfection Sutra, Great Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, he was exhausted. And so Bodhiruchi finished the remaining translations. And during the 6 dynasties, there were actually a few translators doing the translation of this sutra. But Bodhiruchi discovered that all these translations were inadequate. And so he wanted to do a complete compilation. And so between the years 707 and 713, he did a compilation. He compared the different versions of the translations. And he was the overall editor of the sutra. Okay. Right. So now let's look at Bodhiruchi, the translator of this sutra. I'm going to read from this book here. You can find the introduction in the appendix of this book. Okay, so Bodhiruchi was born a Brahman. In India, there are 4 different castes, right? That's the caste system. So you have the Brahmins, which is the highest caste. and then you have the caste of the warriors, and then the third one is the caste of the merchants, right? And then the lowest is the caste of the slaves. Okay, so Bodhiruchi was born, in the highest caste. So he had a very good, he had a very good birth in a very good family, right? And then he renounced the household life to enter the Brahman priesthood at the age of 12. So when he was 12, he became a priest. He was proficient in astronomy, geography, linguistics, Samkhya philosophy, and was generally extremely learned. He became one of the most respected religious scholars of his day. And then at the age of 60, Bodhiruchi started to feel that despite all of his knowledge and philosophy, his learning had not led him any closer to liberation. So when he was 60 years old, he felt that although he was a very respected scholar, but he felt that he was not getting any closer to liberation. So despite his own advanced age, he vowed to immerse himself in the Buddhist teachings and retreated to the mountains to practice asceticism. So it was only when he was 60 that he began to learn about Buddhism. Okay? So if you are not 60 yet, it's okay. Because Bodhiruchi started at 60. Okay? So we still have a long way to go. Right? And later he studied the Buddhist sutras with Yashagosha. Since he was already quite learned, he achieved mastery of the Buddhist doctrines in less than 5 years. So he started at 60, and then in less than 5 years he was able to master the teachings of Buddhism. That's pretty advanced, right? Although he was sort of old, like 60, but probably by 65 he has already mastered most of the teachings. Afterwards, he traveled across the country to teach the Dharma. And gradually his fame spread far and wide. Even Emperor Gaozong of the Tang Dynasty knew of his eloquence and virtue. So he began to travel around India to give teachings on Buddhism. And he was so famous that Emperor Gaozong from China knew about him. The emperor dispatched ambassadors to invite him to the palace. By the time he arrived in Luoyang in the year 693, Bodhiruchi was said to already be 120 years old. So Emperor Gaozong, invited him to go to China, and by the time Bodhiruchi was there, he was already 120. Okay, quite impressive. And not long after Bodhiruchi reached China, Emperor Gaozong passed away. So Emperor Gaozong was the one who invited him to China. But unfortunately, he passed away very quickly. Okay. His wife, Empress Wu, succeeded him as the ruler. And as a devout Buddhist, Empress Wu venerated Bodhiruchi. Empress Wu is Wu Zetian. Okay. And so she's also a Buddhist. So Bodhiruchi became her teacher. She granted Bodhiruchi residence at Foshoji Temple, where he continued his work as a translator. So it was after he met Empress Wu that he began to do translations. So he probably would have done the translations after he was 120 years old, probably 121, which is very, very advanced in age. And much to Empress Wu's delight, at the end of the preface of Reign of Treasures Sutra, Bodhiruchi added a line that read, "The Lord of Heaven of Eastern Moonlight will be born in China. She will be born a woman and rule the world." So this was the line that Bodhiruchi wrote for Empress Wu. And Empress Wu was very delighted when she heard that. Okay, it was such a compliment for her. And Empress Wu gave him the name he would come to know by as Buddhi-Wuchi. So the name Buddhi-Wuchi was given to him by Empress Wu. Okay? And he ultimately translated 11 sutras, including the reign of Treasure Sutra and the Buddha State Sutra. And then in the year 706, during the reign of Emperor Zhongzong of the Tang Dynasty, Buddhi-Wuchi returned to Chang'an. Chang'an is the ancient capital of Xi'an. And he took residence at Tongfu Temple, where he translated sutras such as the Buddha's best syllable of the Wheel-Turning King Sutra. So I think Buddhi-Wuchi has been very fortunate because he has encountered emperors who is very supportive of his translation and who are Buddhists. And so he was able to do such these translations despite his very old age, which is I think it's a very, very good opportunity for him when he arrived in China. And then after 8 years of combining new and old translations, he compiled 49 assemblies, the equivalent of 120 scrolls. So the compilation of the sutra, the Great Treasures Collection Sutra, he actually took 8 years to finish the translations. And after completing the sutra, he ended the translation career and put all of his efforts into practicing the Dharma. So this particular sutra is one of the last sutras that he translated. And then in the year 722, under the reign of Emperor Xuanzong, Buddhi-Wuchi took residence at Chanshou Temple in Luoyang, Henan Province. So he has encountered many different emperors. Right? And in 727, he passed away. His worldly age had reached 166 years. So he lived up to 166 years. It's unbelievable, right? So he came to China when he was 120, and then he did translations, and then he passed away at 166. So, in between, he did probably 30 to 40 years of translations. And in total, he translated 53 sutras. Okay? So, which means he's a pretty efficient translator, considering his old age, considering that he had like 30 to 40 years of translating time, and he was able to translate 53 sutras. So that's like 1 or 2 sutras a year, which is quite a lot. Okay. Right, next we'll go into the sutra. Okay, so this is a general outline of the sutra. So first we have the 8-year-old, which is Sumati, and which is the title of this sutra. So an 8-year-old presents questions to the Buddha, and then after that the Buddha answers the questions accordingly. And then there was a display of miracles. And then at the very end, the Buddha gave a prophecy, and that Sumati would eventually become a Buddha in the end. Okay, so this is a general outline of the sutra. Okay, so I'm going to read through the text of this sutra in this book. Okay, so it goes like this. First have I heard, at one time the Buddha was joined by an assembly of 1,250 monastics, as well as 10,000 great bodhisattvas at Vulture Peak in Rajagriha. And at that time, the daughter of an elder from Rajagriha named Sumati was 8 years old. She had elegant, well-formed facial features and a beautiful complexion. In all regards, she was pleasing to the eye and a pleasure to behold. This was due to the fact that in her previous life, she has paid homage and made offerings to all of the countless Buddhas, planting all wholesome roots. Okay, so in the introduction, it says that there is this girl called Sumati. She's 8 years old, and she is very lovable. She has a very attractive appearance, and this is due to the fact that in the past she has made offerings to the Buddhas for many, many lifetimes. Okay? At that time, this young girl went to see the Tathagata. Tathagata is the Buddha. She paid homage to the Buddha, circumambulated him 3 times, knelt and joined her palms, and spoke in verse. So this is a tradition that during the Buddha's time, that during the assembly, and you see this very often in the sutras. During the assembly, if somebody wants to ask a question, then he would get up from the seat, and then in some text he would say he would bare his right shoulder, and then they would circumambulate the Buddha for 3 times, right? And they would go down on the knees, and then he would start asking the question. Okay? And then the verse goes like this: Supreme, perfect, enlightened one, bright light of this world, concerning Bodhisattva practices, I hope you will allow me to ask you questions. Okay, so the question that Sumati wanted to ask was pretty specific. So what she said is that she wanted to ask questions concerning Bodhisattva practices. Okay, so this is quite a surprise for an 8-year-old. Okay, I think nowadays if you ask an 8-year-old what does it mean by Bodhisattva, I don't think they even know what it means by Bodhisattva. But Sumati is very impressive in the sense that when she asked the questions, she asked straight ahead that she want to ask questions concerning Bodhisattva practices. Okay, which means she is already quite advanced in her spiritual practice. Right? And then the Buddha said to Sumati, now you may ask as you please. I will explain and severe your doubts. At that time, Sumati presented the questions to the Buddha in the form of a verse. Okay, and we also find this format very common in sutras, that you always find stanzas versus instances. And one of the reasons is because it helps in the memory, in memorizing. And during the Buddha's time, they don't have computers, they don't have laptops, they don't have note-taking devices. So how the Buddha gave teachings was through oral transmission. Okay, so it was very usual for people to use and recite the text in verses and stanzas. Okay. And at that time, Sumati presented the questions to the Buddha in the form of a verse. Okay, so the verse goes like this: how does one obtain elegant proper form? So that was the first question. Wealth and nobility. Second question: through what causes and conditions are families kept from destruction? Third question: how can one see this body be reborn by transformation atop a 1,000-petaled lotus and make offerings to all world-honored ones? That's question 4. How can one attain supernatural powers, freely travel throughout innumerable realms, and pay homage to all Buddhas? That's question 5. How does one live blamelessly? Question 6. Ensure one's words are trusted by others. Question 7. Be pure, eliminate Dharma obstructions. Question 8. And forever leave behind all actions of Mara. That's question 9. And how can one, at the end of life, see all Buddhas, hear the pure, pristine Dharma, and no longer be subject to suffering? That's the last question. Okay, so, and then she ended with, supremely honored one of great compassion, I hope you will answer my questions. Okay, so altogether she asked 10 questions. And these 10 questions were very, very advanced questions and not easily understood by, ordinary people. So the questions shocked the assembly, right? And it was questions on the Bodhisattva path, and it covers both aspects, both the worldly and the supramundane aspects of the Bodhisattva path. So, not all the questions that she asked was, concerning, advanced practices. But for example, the first question that she asked was, how do you get a proper appearance? How do you get a good and elegant proper appearance? So, that was on, more on the worldly aspect of the Bodhisattva path. And then the second question she asked was, how do you get wealth? How do you get rich? And how do you get a good status? Okay, so questions like this, which are pretty interesting. Okay. And then at that time, the Buddha said to Sumati, excellent, excellent. It is excellent that you are able to ask such profound teachings. Listen well, think well upon this as I speak to you. And Sumati said, please do, O honored one. I will joyfully listen. Okay. So, and after this, after the introduction, then the Buddha starts to give answers to the different questions. Okay, so the first question was, how do you obtain an elegant, proper form? And so when I saw this question, I thought, in the introduction, we already know Sumati is very pleasing to the eye, right? As what is described in the introduction. Which means she has already attained this elegant, proper form. Okay, so why does she ask a question like this? Why does she even have to ask a question like this? So I think that the reason why she asked this question, I don't think she has asked it for herself. I think probably she asked it on behalf of the assembly, of other people who might be keen to know how to achieve that in the assembly. And I think also another reason why she might ask this question is that if you attain an elegant and a proper form, then it is easier to attract sentient beings and to guide sentient beings with an attractive form. Okay? So she is also asking, on the aspect of a bodhisattva practice. Alright? And so concerning this question, the Buddha said, Sumati, bodhisattvas use 4 methods to attain elegant proper form. What for? First, do not give rise to anger when dealing with unwholesome friends. Second, tranquilly abide with great loving kindness. Third, take deep joy in the true Dharma. And fourth, make Buddha images. Okay, so this is the solution to question 1. And in each question, the Buddha actually gave 4 solutions, 4 different ways in how you can to answer those questions. Okay, so that's the first question, right? Okay, so the first one, do not give rise to anger when dealing with unwholesome friends. Okay, so actually, if you just reflect on how you look when you get angry, or how does one look when one gets angry? doesn't look good, right? The expression doesn't look good. So the form, I think form also has to do with your expression, your facial expression, how you express yourself. And if you are, and you can very easily display those emotions on your face. So if you are, loving, then you have a very loving expression. If you are angry, then you have, then people will try to shy away from you, right? So I think this is pretty common sense. So if you want to have good expression, you have a good appearance, and I think something that you can do, even if you don't have very good, facial features like me, one thing you can do is don't get angry, right? Because if you get angry, then you don't have a good appearance. Okay? Right, and Dharma Master has given also an example in a book on not giving rise to anger when dealing with unwholesome friends. So I think it is sometimes we come to situations when we see people performing unwholesome actions, and we tend to get irritated by that. Right? We tend to get angry when people, act unvirtuously. So I think the practice in this is, how do you develop patience? How do you overcome that kind of irritation? And how do you react when people push your buttons? And so sometimes, if you treat the situation as a bodhisattva practice, then you can use that as a form of practice for patience, and to see that in the perspective that that person might be a bodhisattva, testing out my patience and trying to develop my patience. Okay, and if you see that over time, then I think your appearance start to change and try to, and that's something that we can do in all kinds of situations. Okay. And Dharma Master gave an example here. He says that Master Tzu Hang is one of Dharma Master's early teachers when he arrived in Taiwan. And Master Tzu Hang has told Dharma Master a story about himself. At the time, he was serving as the abbot's attendant at Gusha Monastery. So one day he went to the bathroom, but forgot to bring toilet paper. And in the neighboring store was the head of the tea room. Master Tzu Hang asked him for some toilet paper, but he was a particularly mean-spirited person. And under the store, he handed Master Tzu Hang some used toilet paper to intentionally dirty his hand. Okay, so if you come across such a situation, what would you do? I think in general, most people will get angry. Okay, because that person is so mean, right? And if the head of the tea room had mischievously teased anyone in this way, there is no doubt they would be furious. But Master Tzu Hang was not angry. He let go of the incident as soon as it passed. Okay, so Master Tzu Hang was, I believe he had developed, patience, and that in any kind of situation he was able to let go, no matter what happened. Okay, so that is the kind of practice that we try to achieve in our everyday life. Okay, so especially when people try to push our buttons, you should see that, okay, that's a good opportunity for me to practice patience. Okay. And then the second one is kind of related to the first one. You can really abide with great loving kindness. Okay, so that means you don't give rise to anger, and also not only that you don't give rise to anger, but to meditate on loving kindness intentionally. Okay, and then the third one is to take deep joy in the true Dharma. And then the fourth is to make Buddha images. Okay, And Dharma Master has also given an example here in page 3 of the book on the correlation between making Buddha images and having a proper form. So he says here, once Shariputra, one of the Buddha's great disciples, ran into an old friend of his and exclaimed in surprise, "Oh my, is something wrong? Why do you have such a fierce expression on your face?" Okay, so Shariputra ran into his friend and saw his friend carrying a fierce expression. And his friend replied, "Lately I have been carving statues of demons." And the Dharma Master commented that what we sincerely feel inside will manifest outside. So whatever thoughts that you have, they can manifest on your appearance. So that's like what I was talking about earlier. If you have an angry, mind, then you have an angry expression. It manifests directly on how you look. Okay. So since Sariputra's friend carved so many fierce, foul faces of demons, his own face gradually take on their angry features. And later on Sariputra's advice, the sculptor began carving dignified Buddha statues instead. And slowly, Shariputra's friend became more pleasing to the eye. From then on, each time Sariputra saw him, he would happily comment, "You have taken on such a dignified appearance now." Okay, so when we make Buddha images, I think we are also at the same time we are planting seeds of the Buddha's image within our own mind. And so every time you carve, or every time you make a drawing, every time you make an image of the Buddha, that you are also at the same time you're planting the image, that positive image inside your mind. And so over time, then your mind or your thoughts will tend to be on the same frequency as the Buddha statue, as the Buddha image, right? And that can manifest also externally on your physical form. Okay, so in general, I think for the first path on how you get a proper form is to develop loving kindness and joy. Okay? Right. Now I'll come back to the text in the sutra. So after the Buddha talked about these 4 points, then he repeated the verse again. And in the Buddha's time, because they use oral transmission, so you always find repeated verses. And that is to help the disciples to remember and to recall what the Buddha had said earlier. Okay? So at that time, the woe-honored one spoke the following verse. "Anger ruins wholesome roots, so they no longer grow. Make Buddha images with a kind heart and Dharma joy. When one obtains a body fully adorned with all the auspicious signs, all sentient beings will delight in seeing it." Okay, so which means if you have a proper and elegant appearance or form, then sentient beings will delight in seeing your appearance. Okay, so that is a bodhisattva's intention. Not to make themselves look good, but in that sentient beings will be happy when they see them. Okay? And then the second question is, how do you obtain wealth and nobility? Right. So I think, the first question and the second question apply not only to bodhisattvas, but to everybody in general. I think people in general are also looking for the same thing, except for different intention, I think. When we talk about, for example, the proper form, bodhisattvas do it because they want sentient beings to be happy when they see them. Okay, but whereas I think ordinary beings want to have a proper form so that people will praise them or compliment them. Okay, so that's, they might go for the same thing but with a different intention. Okay. And then the second question is, how do you obtain wealth and nobility? And the Buddha said, once again, Sumati, Bodhisattvas use 4 methods to obtain wealth and nobility. What for? First, give timely give. Second, give without a contempt or arrogance. Third, give joyfully. Fourth, give with no expectation of reward. Okay, right. So the first one, to give timely gifts. What does it mean by giving timely gifts? It means to give at the right time. Okay. So, for example, if somebody is full, then you don't take him out for dinner. Okay. There can be many different examples, but to give at the, to make the gift at the right time, that is a skillful means of the Bodhisattva. Okay, and not to give, also to give the correct things, not to give things that is not suitable for the recipient. And also sometimes we tend to give things that we don't want, right? So those things that we don't want, we give them, happily to others. And then those things that we want or we desire, then we might, give unwillingly. So that's not giving with the right attitude. Okay. The second one is to give without contempt or arrogance. So not to see yourself as not to see yourself as highly, and to see the recipient as lowly, and not to have this kind of discrimination between the giver and the recipient. Okay, so it's important that you do not give with contempt or arrogance. Okay, and I correlate the 4 points that the Buddha gave with the 4 givings that Dharma Master has been advocating. So the first one, giving timely give, is to make it convenient for others. So to give, at a convenient time, and to give objects that is convenient for the recipient. Second one, to give without contempt or arrogance, is also to install confidence in the other person. Okay. And then the third one is to give joyfully. Dharma Master has given an example here by what it means to give joyfully. So on page 23 of the book, right? So it says here, in the Buddha's time, there lived an elder of such extraordinary wealth that he was nicknamed 10,000 fortunes. However, despite his wealth, he consumed coarse food, wore tattered clothes, and rode on a weak, malnourished horse. So although he was very rich, he was leading a very poor life. Okay? Eventually, he fell gravely ill and died. So in the end, he became very ill and he died. Having no heirs, all his wealth was forfeited to the public treasury. Okay, so because he had no heirs, he had no descendants to pass the money to. So everything goes back to the public treasury. So he was left with nothing. And at that time, King Prasanajit thought that 10,000 fortunes predicament was off. How was it that someone could have so much wealth but be unable to enjoy it? He went to the Buddha to ask if he could explain 10,000 fortunes karma to him. And the Buddha replied, that elder was greedy by nature. Not only was he unwilling to give, but when he did give something, he quickly felt regret. That is why he suffered such karmic effects. Okay, so although this elder was very rich, but he did not have the right attitude when he was giving. So every time he gave, he was regretful of what he gave. Right? Okay, so it's important to give with joy and to give willingly. and to be able to let go of what you give. Because giving is actually a way to overcome thriftiness and to overcome greed and attachment. Okay? So if you give with regret, that means you are still having attachment and greed to the object that you're giving. Right? So instead of overcoming greed, you are actually, you're making greed even and attachment even stronger. Okay? Okay, and then the last one is to give with no expectation of reward. So there is another example here that the Master has given in page 25. So in this example, we talked about the Chan Master. Chan Master taught the Dharma for the benefit of all beings. His thoughts were extraordinary. Every time he gave teachings, the audience was packed so tightly that some suggested they should expand the lecture hall. At that time, one donor bought $100 to offer to Chan Master as a donation for the expanded lecture hall. Okay, so this donor came with $100 and he wants to donate the money to expand the lecture hall. After the master accepted the contribution, he left to take care of another matter. The donor was annoyed at the master's emotionless response and angrily shouted, $100 isn't pocket change. How could you take my money without even offering a word of thanks? Okay, so he was asking, how can you take my money without even saying thank you? And the master coolly replied, I see. The donor's anger grew even stronger. Master, I donated $100. Why do you not even bother to thank me? The master stopped walking and explained, if you give money to the Buddha, then the merit gain is yours. If you treat donations like they are part of a business deal, then I'll thank you on behalf of the Buddha. Now the transaction is complete. Okay, so the donor made some donation, right? When we do donation, that's an act of practice, a practice of giving. And the donor was very attached to having something in return, right? He was expecting the master to say thank you or something like that. So he wasn't really, wholeheartedly doing the giving, okay? But he was actually expecting something in return. Okay, so it's very important, and it's very, we need to be very careful every time we give, so that we do not accumulate negative karma from this kind of practice of giving. So it's like you can have two people doing and giving the same thing. But if one person gives, wholeheartedly and willingly and with joy in his mind, then this person gains a lot of merit. But if another person gives the same thing, but he was unwilling to give, and he gives as soon as he gives, he begins to feel regret, and and he expects something in return. Then instead of accumulating merits, at the same time you're accumulating negative karma, right? So, on this practice, we need to be very careful, and we need to be very clear about the attitude that we should have when it comes to giving. Okay, so in summary, how do you get wealth? How do you get nobility? Is to give with the right attitude. Okay, so to give timely gifts, to make it convenient for other people, to give without contempt or arrogance, to give joyfully, and to give with no expectation of reward. Okay, so here, the World-Honored One spoke a verse. Give timely gifts without contempt or arrogance. Do so joyfully with no expectation of reward. Strive onwards in this manner in your constant cultivation, therein wealth and noble status will be obtained. Okay, so that's for question 2. Okay, and then the third one. So after we have a proper form, after we have wealth, then the third one we might be concerned about is how do we have a harmonious relationship? Right? How do you keep families from destruction? Okay? And the Buddha gave 4 different methods. Bodhisattvas use 4 methods to keep their families from destruction. What 4? First, skillfully abandon divisive language. Second, persuade sentient beings marked by wrong view to abide in right view. Third, protect and assure the continuation of the true Dharma. Fourth, teach all sentient beings to attain Buddhahood. Okay, so these are the 4 points. Right. So first one, to skillfully abandon divisive language. I think that is common sense. If you want to have a harmonious relationship, then you don't say things that break people up. Right? You don't say something to A, and then you don't say something different to B, and then you create, and you create, different views in different people, and then they do not have a consensus among people. Then definitely, people is gonna not have a harmonious relationship. So it's very important that we need to be consistent in what we say. So if you say something to A, then you have to make sure that you say the same thing to B and to C, and so that everybody has a consensus on what is going on, and definitely that is very key and a very important element in keeping a harmonious relationship. And then the second one is to persuade sentient beings marked by wrong view to abide in right view. Okay, so Brahma Master here gives as an example of what it means by wrong view. Okay, so Brahma Master say in this book, people who pray to Buddhas and Bodhisattvas like they are gods of wealth are treating them like an insurance company. Okay, so people sometimes pray to Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas as if there's an insurance company. That means you pray to the Buddha, you have to bless me, you have to protect me, and you're buying insurance, right? With greed like this, how can they expect to practice the compassionate giving of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas? So that is a wrong view. That when you go to the temple and you seek for something in return. I have also heard a disciple say, Master, I am not going to be a vegetarian anymore. I've been a vegetarian for several decades now, and my body is still weak, prone to illness and dependent on medication. Evidently, he did not become a vegetarian to compassionately protect life. Okay, so the idea behind becoming a vegetarian is to practice compassion, to reduce the suffering of sentient beings, to reduce killing. And so that is the basic idea behind being a vegetarian. Okay? So instead he did so to stay young, live a long life, and maintain his wealth. So the motivation of this person in trying to become a vegetarian is to stay young and to live a long life and to have a healthy body. In reality, if you want to live a long life, in reality, if you want to live a healthy life, you must live in moderation, control your diet, and get the appropriate amount of exercise. This is the only way to get results. Faith and health are subject to different forms of cause and conditions. How can you mix them together? Okay, so in here, Brahma Master is saying that if you want to have a healthy life, you have to create the cause for a healthy life, right? You need to exercise, you need to eat moderately, So that is the way in which you get a healthy life. And the intention behind becoming a vegetarian, if that is for developing compassion, then the result of becoming a vegetarian is that you become more compassionate. Okay, so that's the cause and the effect of the practice of compassion by being a vegetarian. So to mix, trying to get a healthy life, trying to prolong your life, and to mix that with the intention of compassion behind being a vegetarian, that these two things are different. Okay, they're very different intentions. Okay, so it's very important that you need to know what's the motivation behind the action that you are doing. Okay, right. And then the third one, to protect and ensure the continuation of the true Dharma. And then the fourth one is to teach all sentient beings to attain Buddhahood. So in general, this is the 4 points actually point to how you protect the true Dharma. Okay, so if you are able to lead sentient beings or to guide others on right views, the right developing the right concepts and the right ideas behind everything that you do, every action that you make. And also, when we talk about wrong views, it also include, seeing impermanence as permanence. Okay, not seeing something that's impermanence and thinking that it's permanent. And then that's the kind of view that we always have actually. You see this cup, theoretically and maybe intellectually, you would know, okay, this is impermanent. But when you possess it, you would tend to think that it's permanent, right? And also intellectually, we might see that, okay, this cup is made from the factory, it gets the ingredient, the things to make this cup comes from very different sources, and then it's being manufactured in the factory, and then it's being shipped to the shop. There are many causes and conditions that come in to make this cup. Okay, so the reason why it's here in this very form, there is a lot of causes and conditions behind. But we tend to see it as having a kind of identity. We tend to see it as a whole instead of in parts, right? And we tend to think that it has its own, it is an entity on its own. We tend to think it in that way. Okay, so in order to develop the right view, it's actually very important to meditate on impermanence and to constantly meditate on it. So for example, actually in your daily life, you can meditate on impermanence in everything that you do. So for example, you're now here in this talk, it's impermanent. You have come from different places. You have sit here for nearly an hour. Your sensation have changed over the past 45 minutes. You are already experiencing that impermanence, right? But unless you are aware, unless you intentionally make yourself aware of that, we don't see that impermanence. So to meditate is also to make yourself consciously aware of what is going on. Okay? And to see that, this talk is going to end. So if you feel like you want to go away, you just think it's going to end in 45 minutes. And so all the activities that you do, you can actually use that as a part of your practice. So that's what humanistic Buddhism is about. It's not in the books. The practice is not in the books. The books are a sort of guidance. They tell you the theories. But you have to do the practice. And the way to practice is actually through mindfulness. and to develop the right kind of mindfulness. And sometimes you need to remind yourself that you need to be mindful of what's going on. And you need to remind yourself that, okay, maybe you want to go, you're hungry, you go to a restaurant, and you can remind yourself, this is the reason why I might yearn for some kind of food is because of what my tongue is actually telling me, right? Not because of that the food will gratify, but because the reason why we always look and yearn for good food is that our tongue is always giving us the message that you should get attached to that kind of taste. And you can try that. If you eat very mindfully and you are intentionally putting your attention on how the taste change over time, from the time you put the food into your mouth to the time when you swallow it down. And if you intentionally put your attention on that, then you can see how the taste actually changes over time. And you can see the impermanence in the food that you are tasting. And then with that kind of intention, with that kind of awareness, then you're more unlikely to yearn for food, to yearn for the same kind of food. And lately I've been watching when I was on a plane here, I watched this documentary by BBC. It's on an experiment on crash diet. And they got 4 volunteers to do the experiment on the crash diet. These 4 volunteers are overweight. They are obese and seriously overweight. And they have a lot of medical conditions. So what they did was, before they put them on the crash diet, they get them into a house, and then they brought the food that they liked the most. So one of the volunteers have takeaway food every day. So she's eating burgers and French fries every day, like for every meal. And she says that is what I eat, I feed on. And she cannot imagine herself not eating that for any day. Okay? And she's been trying to reduce her weight, she's been trying to get on a diet, but because she's so attached to the food that she has been very successful in dieting. And so after that, on the second day, they start the crash diet. So the crash diet is basically just powdered, they just mix some powder with water. But this is actually a formulated powder. So they have all the nutrients that they need for that day. But for them, it's a very terrible experience because they cannot get the kind of food that they have been eating every day. And at the end of the week, I think the volunteers were very, very near to crying and breaking down, because they are so used to that kind of food that they have been eating. And I think what the crash diet taught them was that when they are mindful of what they eat, then they realize that what they have been eating for many years in the past has been due to the fact that they are attached to the taste. They are attached to the taste and attached to what they have been eating over the past few years. So for some people, they feel like they are addicted to a particular kind of food. It's not really the addiction. They are not really addicted. but because they are unconsciously eating it. And unconscious eating causes that kind of attachment. And also sometimes it's because of the kind of emotion that we relate ourselves to the food. So for example, I remember that when I was in college, when I go back from university back home, I will always go to McDonald's and I always buy, I'm pretty ashamed to say that now, but I always buy a particular set meal. It's like to celebrate the weekend and then to enjoy the next 2 days. So it's like sometimes the attachment doesn't really come from the food. It comes from that kind of emotional longing that you want to have a kind of celebration, a little kind of ritual celebration, and you kind of connect that with food. Okay, so that's something, I think that's something that we can ponder on and try to be aware of in our everyday life. Of course now I don't go to McDonald's anymore. I'm very happy with this way. Okay. Okay, and then at the time the Wu on the one spoke a verse, abandon divisive language and wrong views. The true Dharma has yet to perish, it can still be protected. Lead sentient beings to abide in great enlightenment. When this is accomplished, everyone will be kept from destruction. Okay, so that's the third path. Okay, next we move on to question 4. The fourth question is, how to be born by transformation in the presence of a Buddha atop a lotus throne. Okay, so again, this is slightly more advanced than the previous 3 questions. In the previous 3 questions, that is, questions I think generate what everybody's looking for. Having a good appearance, having wealth, having a good family relationship, right? But question 4 is slightly more difficult to comprehend. What does it mean by to be born by transformation in the presence of a Buddha atop a lotus throne? Okay. So in the book, Venerable Master explained that there are 4 kinds of ways that we can get born. So one of the ways to get born is to be manifested on top of the lotus. That is when you get to the Western Pure Land, right? When you get to the Western Pure Land, you are no longer bounded by karma, and you are born not in the same way as we do in the Saha world, in this world, right? In the Western Pure Land, you actually get manifested from a lotus. Okay? So for me, this is difficult to comprehend because I've never experienced that yet. So what does it mean by to be born by transformation? And the Buddha gave 4 points. So Bodhisattvas use 4 methods to be born by transformation in the presence of a Buddha atop a lotus throne. What 4? First, offer flowers, fruits, and powdered incense at Tathagata stupas in temples. Right, so that is something that we can do at the temple. Right, every time we come to the temple, we would usually make an offering of either incense, or flowers, or light, right, in the shrines. So first one is not too difficult. When you come to the temple, you make an offering. Okay? And then second, never bring harm upon others. Third, make Tathagata images and place them upon lotus thrones. And fourth, develop a pure faith in the enlightenment of all Buddhas. Okay, so in this particular question on getting birth in the presence of a Buddha, that is, how do you meet a Buddha? And how do you get yourself in a manifested form? So, I think apart from making offerings, the second point number 2 is actually quite important. Never bring harm to anybody. Okay? So, it's like if you have done something wrong, if you have harmed somebody, you will be quite embarrassed to meet the Buddha, right? So it's like if you want to create the cause for meeting the Buddha, if you want to meet the Buddha, you have to create the right causes. Okay? So it's like, so this is very much related to what kind of cause you create. Okay? So it's like making a connection with the Buddha. So making offerings to the Buddha, making kata-kata images and placing them upon lotus throne. So that is also a way of making connection, getting yourself connected to the Buddha, like when you make images of the Buddha. And the fourth one, to develop a pure faith in the enlightenment of all Buddhas. So that's the same thing. Okay? So in general, is to have deep faith in great enlightenment. Okay? And to make a connection to the Buddha. Right. And then question 5, this is also another difficult question. The questions are getting more and more difficult. And more, difficult to comprehend. What does it mean? Why is Sumati asking these kinds of questions? Question 5, how do you travel from one Buddha land to another? So again, when I look at this question, what does it mean, one Buddha land to another Buddha land? How does one Buddha land actually look like in the first place? Because I don't think I've ever been to a Buddha land, so I don't know what it looks like. So the only reference that I can relate to is the Buddha Museum of Fo-Guang-Shan, Singapore. So how do you travel from one Buddha land to another? But actually, if you look at the sutras, if you know Amitabha Sutra, you will see that the Bodhisattvas are described to travel to different Buddha lands every morning and to make offerings to the different Buddhas, right? But of course, for us, it can be quite abstract unless we have experienced that before. So for me, that was something pretty difficult to comprehend. But we can always look at the sutras because the Buddha has described, this kind of traveling between Buddha lands in the scriptures. So in the text, there was this example. There was this story of Moggallana. Moggallana is the disciple who is foremost in psychic power. And so once the Buddha was giving a teaching to his disciples, and he told his disciples that every time I give a teachings, my voice could be heard in the 3,000-fold universe. Okay? And Moggallana heard that and thought if that is possible. And he wanted to test it out. He wanted to test if the Buddha's voice could be heard in another Buddha land. So using his psychic power, he traveled out of the Saha world and into another Buddha land. And he came to this Buddha land, which is recited by the Buddha called the Keshvara Raja Buddha. In Chinese, I think it is 师自在王如来. And this particular Buddha, at that time when he was there, he was also giving a teaching to his disciples. And the beings in this Buddha land were very big in size. So when Moggallana went to this Buddha land, he appeared to be very, very small, like a little worm. So he actually appeared like a worm on one of the disciples' clothing. So Lokeshvara Raja was giving a teaching, and then his disciples were listening to his teachings, And then one of the disciples discovered this little worm suddenly appearing on his clothes, and he wanted to take it away and throw it out. But Lokeshvara stopped him and said, "You can't do that. He is a disciple of Shakyamuni Buddha. He's Moggallana." And then Lokeshvara told Moggallana that your state of attainment is not as high as the Buddha, and that you are not able to fathom, the states of the Buddha, of a fully enlightened one, and that you should never doubt the words of your teacher. Okay, and actually, when Moggallana was there, he was able to hear his teacher's voice. He was able to hear Shakyamuni's voice teaching at the same time when Lokeshvara was teaching. And so when Moggallana heard the voice, he decided that what his teacher was saying was true, and he went back to his own Buddha land. To the Saha world where Sakyamuni Buddha is. Okay, so through that stories and then through the Amitabha Sutra, you can get a glimpse of what it means by travel to different Buddha lands. And also in the sutras, it's also written that Moggallana has and his good friend Sariputra, two of them were able to travel through the 6 realms. And they travel through the 6 realms. They meet different kinds of beings. They meet the heavenly beings. They meet the hungry ghosts. They meet the animals. They meet the hell beings. And they are able to know what are the causes that created them to be reborn in those different realms. Okay, and he was able, with that experience, then they are able to go back to the human world and to share the experience with the disciples, with the other Buddha's disciples, and to teach on the law of causality, the law of cause and effect. What are the things that you should prevent from doing? Okay, so in this particular question, on how do you travel from one Buddha land to another? So the Buddha said, Bodhisattvas use 4 methods to travel from one Buddha land to another. What for? First, do not hinder or become angry at the sight of others cultivating wholesomeness. Second, do not impede others from speaking the Dharma. Third, light lamp offerings at Tathagata stupas. And fourth, continuously cultivate all varieties of meditative concentration. Okay. Right. So, I think when I first look at the first one, do not hinder or become angry at the sight of others cultivating wholesomeness. I think in general, when we see people cultivating wholesomeness, we will not get angry. Right? In general. But in what situations would one get angry or become, will one hinder at the sight of others cultivating wholesomeness? So that's a situation when one becomes jealous of the success or the accomplishment of other people. So, for example, I'll just give you an example. For example, a volunteer gets praised by the abbess for doing something good at the temple, and then another volunteer might get jealous, and then he might get angry of this volunteer doing something good, right? So that is something that unconsciously that might come to our mind. I believe consciously we will not have this kind of mentality, but probably unconsciously when that seed of jealousy comes up within our mind, we might have that thought of getting angry when people are actually doing something good. Okay, do not impede others from speaking the Dharma. I think in Singapore we don't have that problem. It's not like in mainland China where it's a communist country and people can get, they have a lot of restrictions on public Dharma talks they cannot give a proper talk in, the usual kind of setting that we have in Singapore. And I think Singapore is a very fortunate place. We have all kinds of traditions, the Buddhist traditions here. So you can get to learn about Tibetan Buddhism, you can get to learn about, the Theravada Buddhism, and also in both English and Chinese. So it's a very, very fortunate place here. Like lamp offering at Kata Stupas, I think also that is something that you can do. Every time you come to the temple, you can light a lamp offering, make a lamp offering. And continuously cultivate all varieties of meditative concentration. So that is, you can meditate on probably like loving kindness, meditate on compassion, meditate on rejoicing when others are successful, meditate on patience, meditate on equanimity. So there are many kinds of meditation that you can do. And especially when somebody pushes your button, you can meditate on patience. Right, that's the situation. And you can have, to every kind of situation, there's always an antidote. There's always a solution to that. So it's on whether we are alert enough to discover that distraction is coming up in our mind, and to be alert enough to quickly find a solution to tackle this problem. Okay. So in general, I think on the fifth path of traveling freely in Buddha lands is to encourage wholesome and virtuous actions. Okay? Right. I think we have the last 5 minutes.
How to make a Buddha image?
How do you make a Buddha image? If you know how to draw, you can draw one. If you are good at sculpting, you can sculpt one. Or maybe you can Google a Buddha image and try to imitate, try to mimic one on your own. I think there are many ways to do that. Or if you are like me, who doesn't know how to draw or how to sculpt, I think one way is you can get an image and just look at it and just meditate on it and just appreciate the image and to contemplate on the qualities of the Buddha. So the idea of this making the image is actually to help us to recall the qualities of the Buddha. That the Buddha has developed infinite loving kindness. That regardless of how people treat him, no matter how bad people treat him, he's always able to respond with infinite love. So the idea behind is to recall the qualities of the Buddha. So I think that's one way you can do to get an image and to meditate on the qualities, all the good qualities of the Buddha. Of course, if you can draw, then you can go ahead and draw. It's even better. But I know it's difficult drawing the image. But it's also a way of meditation, drawing a Buddha image. And when you're drawing the eyes, for example, you can visualize how the Buddha looks at all sentient beings. He looks at all beings with compassion, with love. And when you draw that, you gain innumerable merits from drawing the eyes.
Where can I find the Tathagata stupas in Singapore? Or is there any Tathagata stupas in Fo-Fang-Shan, Singapore?
Well, the stupa is, traditionally the stupa is used to enshrine the relics of the Buddha. So the stupa is to symbolize the presence of the Buddha. So, well, you can say Foguaishan Singapore is a Tathagata stupa because we acknowledge the presence of the Buddha here. Right? So if you don't have to particularly Google map find where's the Tathagata stupa. You can come here and make the offering. Yeah, and if you have an altar in your house, you can make the offering in, if you have an altar, it's even more convenient.
Okay, thank you.
Just now you mentioned about the if we can mindfully taste the food, that means we can detach from the attachment to the food. Is that correct?
Yes.
A simple question. Thank you very much for your talk. There are so many teachings nowadays. How do we distinguish between the right view and the wrong view? Because it's important to start with the right view, right perception, and walk the right path. There are many other teachings of Buddhism who all claim to be correct. How can we distinguish?
Okay, very good question. In general, Buddhism talks about the 3 seals, or 4 in the Dharma tradition. The three seals is all compounded phenomena is impermanent. That's the first seal. Right? And then the second one is that all compounded phenomena is selfless, which means they come with at least 2 conditions. It's the coming together of at least 2 conditions to make something work. So there is no single element that can exist independently on its own. Okay. Yeah. And then the third one is.
True, but some other teachings they don't talk. They may or may not talk about this, you see, because they all claim to be the correct version or view of Buddhism. So how do we make sure that we stay on the right path, like the Fopang San's teachings?
Well, the 3 seals. The 3 seals is like the reason why it's called a seal.
The job.
It means authenticity. Right? That means that's why it's called a seal. It means it's verified. So if you have a teaching that doesn't talk about impermanence, how can you call it a Buddhist teaching? Right? And if you have a teaching that doesn't talk about selflessness, how can you call it a Buddhist teaching? So basically, I think it must be talking about the 3 seals. And if you have come across any tradition that says that if you practice this, you will become impermanent. If you practice this, you will become permanent, or you will have an everlasting self, then that is definitely a wrong view. Yeah. And I think also that if it's a correct teaching, it helps you to be more and more detached. And it helps you to get more and more joy in your life. And you can experience that. Right? Every time, for example, every time you finish a Dharma service, you might feel joy. That's Dharma joy. And if you experience Dharma joy, then definitely that's a good teaching. That's a right teaching. For example, if you go for a monastic retreat, you feel Dharma joy, then definitely that must be the right practice.
Any more questions from the audience? Okay, if not, we shall end tonight's talk. I'm sure you agree that it was a very refreshing talk. Okay, can we show our appreciation to Venerable YouLu for such a wonderful Dharma? Step out to Venerable. Step out.